us for another episode of the Investor Spotlight Podcast. Today we have Branton Blount in Las Vegas, Nevada. He's an investor of 3 years and has already made great strides in the areas of multifamily, commercial lending, and focusing on taxation. Branton, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. So can you share a little bit about your background and how you got into real estate in the first place?
Absolutely. I started like a lot of folks, you've got a background, you don't have a background in investing, you have a W-2 job, you want additional sources of income. So you go the HGTV route. You think, well, I'm going to flip some houses for, and then you learn that's very transactional. It's also another full-time job. And so there wasn't a lot of room or time in life for that, but started to learn about the taxation end of it, owning rentals, capital gains versus active earned income, and all those things you evolve as you learn. Read a lot of or listened to a lot of books on my commute to the job, which was about an hour each way when I was living in Seattle.
Thinking, I got to get out of this commute. I got to get out of this job.
Exactly. But we definitely used the time effectively, went through a lot of Audible books and a lot of podcasts. And, there's so many different options out there that it's very easy to get shiny object syndrome, where you're just, flip, I'm going to rent, I'm going to wholesale, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So it takes
How did
a
you
little while.
pick what you were going to do?
Yeah, there's a natural progression, but most of us understand the single family stuff. It comes naturally psychologically, I think, because we own homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started that route, did a single family home, and rehabbed it, got it from a wholesaler, learned about hard money, used a hard money lender to acquire it, and refinanced out, had a renter in there, and recovered all of my funds, put it onto a long-term mortgage. What I learned through that process was I wasn't going to be able to scale it. Residential lending is brutal for anyone who's bought a home or bought either personally or a rental house. It's based off your own personal finances, your own personal debt to income. So there's a lot of commingling there of your personal financial life and trying to grow a business. And that can be very frustrating. But I didn't know any better. And I also learned that after 4 or 5 months of acquiring the property and rehabbing the property and getting a renter in, 4 to 5 months of work, and you have one door. So again, hard to scale, at least in my mind, in any reasonable amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a career in the military and in law enforcement was my background. I wanted to scale quicker than, it was not a 10-year plan. It was more of a 3-year plan. How can I create these passive sources of income? And it was during that time that I had that single family house that I came across the multifamily realm. And it seemed to check a lot of the boxes for me. The lending is commercial lending. When you're 5 or more units in a building, it's commercial lending. And it's banks look at it completely differently. They're not looking at you as the borrower so much as the property as business in a box, total income over total expenses. And so that was really nice. It's much faster. It's there's an assumption that that in the commercial world that you are a more educated and savvy investor.
Yeah, and the spotlight's not on you as a person to hold that mortgage.
They're not looking at your debt to income ratio and they're not asking for all your tax returns and pay stubs and all those things we go through just to buy a home. And so this was much more about the property. They check your credit, make sure you're a respectable borrower.
Person. Yeah.
Exactly. But other than that, if you have a decent credit score or above and you partner up with folks, you can move forward pretty quickly. And so after going through the single family lending a couple times, it was just such a refreshing process to go through the commercial side.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard a story like that. I've never heard about the commercial lending side. It's like, we all know it's there, but to know that it's more simplistic is really, really.
Yeah, and I was not, for no reason, I had a complete bias against it in my head. I thought, oh, single family is where it's at. I'm going to flip and own homes and
because that's what we're
all this kind of
comfortable
stuff.
with.
And I think it's just because we're naturally in our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of other reasons, between taxation and all the tax benefits of multifamily properties and commercial lending that I can't speak to whether or not they are or not achievable with single family investing, but it's definitely more condensed and more efficient in my mind, mostly because I like the idea of having 10 doors or 50 doors under one roof, one
Yes.
yard, one property, instead of 50 different homes around town or in different neighborhoods or different towns, cities, states. So, and the big thing is when you're looking, what I was looking at is something that was more risk adverse, and single family homes can get clobbered in a downturn,
Hmm.
whereas apartments generally don't get nearly the hit during recessions,
Yeah.
downturns,
Or they
like
even
that.
do better, right? Because the people who can't be in their houses anymore go to an apartment. So,
Well, and I wanted to do a value add strategy, starting with limited funds, as many people do, where all of our quote unquote wealth is in our 401ks, as we're traditionally taught.
mm-hmm.
Not a lot of disposable income, no huge chunks of money or a rich uncle to get me started, so to speak. So it was challenging, and you have to reuse the same money, is essentially recycling it. And the nice thing about the commercial realm is that the values are based off of that net operating income, how efficiently you run your business. Increasing the income, decreasing the expenses, increases the value of the property. It's not as directly tied to the comparables in the same neighborhood of the same bed, bath, and square footage like on the single family home realm.
Mm-hmm.
So the nice thing about that is you can buy low and you can force a ton of appreciation into that property. And the value is based off of what you've created, not based off of the house down the street or
Right.
the 5 houses that have sold in the last 6 months.
So you have more
So
control over that investment and the
untethered, yeah,
gains that you're
and that's
going
the
to
key word.
get.
More control over your investment and over the asset.
That sounds great. So whenever you made the multifamily investment, did you just go out and do it on your own, or did you have like a mentor or a partner? Because you
Partnered up
seem
with some
so
like-minded. Yeah, I'm a teams guy. I love creating teams. I love succeeding with people. I love talking through the process and brainstorming and getting together and doing that stuff. I found
yeah.
one or two like-minded guys that were interested in the same ultimate goals, which I think is important in partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some will call it their why. You have to have the same why or similar.
Yeah. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Going in the same direction, exactly. And we got together and we were thinking there's a scarcity mentality when you start, and most people don't know about raising money or syndications or other private debt investors. That was a foreign world to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was based off of how much money do we have? What can we afford with our money?
So
But we
did y'all do
started
a
there like
syndication for the first?
we did not. We used and we wanted also some credibility. We want start to finish on our own with our own money, so that when we do go and talk to other people and ask or take their capital,
Mm-hmm.
we can be good stewards of that capital. We can have credibility in the game. We've been through it ourselves with our own money, and we can speak to all aspects of it. Doesn't mean that you learn it all in one project. Constantly learning, constantly making mistakes. But if you've been through the process and you haven't, delegation is important, but if you've done it all yourself at some point, I think that you can speak intelligently on it and confidently. And
I think it bridges the trust too, whenever you're speaking with people that you may
and I
not
think
really
you can
know.
mitigate risk, and you can minimize the problem. So when they do pop up, you can weather that storm a little bit better and move through it quicker and more efficiently. So we did. We partnered up. We shopped by price, which can be a dangerous game. You can find yourself in either the wrong towns, wrong neighborhoods, wrong markets. But we acquired a 16-unit property that was a heavy value add, and we executed our strategy. We bought at a good price. We don't do any huge complicated underwriting. What is it? What are the rents right now? What are the expenses? Where do we think that we can increase one and reduce the other? And what are the market rents times by the amount of units times 12 months? It's pretty simple stuff. A lot of people make it very complicated. It does not need to be. And I shy away from spreadsheets with 60 different colors and 70 tabs.
I was going to say, we've all seen the spreadsheets that are like, input all your information here, and then it's going to throw out this number and tell you if it's a good deal or not. And it's just looking at the spreadsheet is like, ah.
I totally agree. And I think a lot of people want to impress investors or impress somebody else. And so they make these ultra complicated things, and it doesn't actually make the underwriting any better. It's just more complicated looking and appearing. So, and if that's the way you get a sense of sophistication, then go for it.
More power to you. Yeah.
I prefer very basic 6th grade math. And that's really where we kept it. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And the formulas are only as good as the data that you plug in, which I think is where most investors go wrong. They overestimate what the rent can be. And they underestimate the expenses and the costs of the project. Cost overruns, time, contractors, those words are all synonymous. So, and when we went through it, it was great. We had drug activity and people not paying rent. We bought from an owner where the property manager had 1 lease, maybe 2 leases out of 15 occupied units.
Wow.
It was rough, but it was good because we learned the eviction process. We did it remotely. None of us lived there. And that was partly to create the team as a point of practice, create the teams remotely, manage them remotely, because we knew that would be good for us in the long run, being able to do that remotely and delegate the decision making, which is really key in any, I think, business operation. So we went through that. We found some great contractors, which took a couple months. We got the project underway. We under budgeted, as it happens. We live and learn. But we moved on through a lot of evictions. A lot of people, as soon as we shined a bright light on that property, all of a sudden people disappeared, which was good.
Yeah, and easier for you.
Exactly. We went down to 1 tenant, which can be tough.
Wow.
Something we did not have enough of was reserves. Anyone getting into this business, assume if you're doing a reposition of a property, raising rents and doing renovations, and depending on the neighborhood and the type of tenants that are in there, you should have enough on hand to take that property down to 0 income for at least a period of time. And if you have planned for that, your budget will be okay. But
what do you think the period of time would be, like 3 months, or I've heard different?
Exactly. So we thought it was going to be 4 months. It turned into 6, and that's how that goes. But we renovated all the units, 13 of the 16 units. We began lease up, and it was great. And one of the challenges, again, live and learn, a lot of the hard money lenders and different bridge loan products to acquire unstabilized properties like this are 12 months. You should never get a 12-month loan. Ever.
May not even be done with your renovations and all of this mess that you're talking about in 12 months.
Absolutely. And then you have a 1 month delay in the construction, and then another month delay in lease up, and then another month, and that pushes back your required stabilization period. And so all of a sudden you find yourself, what was supposed to be a 4-month project, you're pushing up to 9-10 months. And so if you do get a 12-month loan, make sure you've got a relatively inexpensive extension option to get another 6 months or 12 months. But we now only look at a 12 month, but it's got to be a 12 to 24 or a 12 to 36 without costing us an arm and a leg to extend. But again, you live and learn, and you can learn from that. It was a smaller town. We knew that it was an unstabilized property at the time, but we were pushing up to our 12 months. So there's ways around that. We made friends with and built rapport with local bankers in small banks that have local decision-making processes. If you put an application to a Wells Fargo or Bank of America or any of those, who knows where that decision's being made? And
could be by a computer.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably not, you're right. It's not even human. Whereas a local community credit union or a local bank branch, they get together once a week and make a decision with 6 or 8 people on who they're going to loan to. And so they can loan to you as a person and as a team more so sometimes than the property. And we relied on that. We were able to do a cash out refinance at the 9-month mark on an unstabilized asset and be able to pay off the hard money loan and pull out all of our money and break even.
Smart.
Yeah. So we paid off the bridge loan. We paid back the $150,000 in renovations that we had put up our own money for.
Mm.
And we were break even and we own the asset. So it's nice to have no money in the game and still own a cash producing asset.
Absolutely. Now that it's all done, now you'll start creating that
Absolutely.
revenue, and
And
you
that's
have 16 doors to do it.
exactly. And that's the power of multifamily. Had those been single family homes, tough to predictably push that much value in. And we bought at $275,000. We put 150 into it. We were all in for about $430,000. And 9 months after we bought it, it appraised for 600.
Hmm.
So we had effectively doubled the value, and we were able to take out a conservative 75% loan to value commercial loan, pay off the loan, our bridge loan, pay ourselves back, and own the asset. And
Awesome.
we're not over leveraged. We can be at down to 60% occupancy and still break even on the property, which I think
That's
that's
nice.
a lot of
That's a good
that can
crutch.
happen. A lot of the times people are too close to the wire. A dip in the market or a dip in vacancy, for example. Right now, I'm not sure
Now,
when this will be. With COVID-19 virus spread, people are losing their jobs or they're being laid off. There's going to be a lot of rent issues, rent payment issues, and so
yeah.
that trickles through the whole system. And
And with the rules in some areas where they're saying you can't evict anybody, well, people are just, some people might take advantage of it and just say, oh, I can't get evicted, so I'm not going to pay, even though they could pay.
Exactly. Or and maybe they can't, or maybe that you have to, we're talking to tenants about splitting up the payments and waiving any penalty fees for that. But if we were in a position to where we don't have enough reserves in the bank, or we're over leveraged to the point where one person doesn't pay rent and we can't make our mortgage payment, it would be an irresponsible business model. And I think a lot of investors can fall into that, trying to massage the numbers. So, and we're getting more and more conservative in how we buy, how we underwrite, and what we plan for.
So the name of the game is being very conservative. Don't over embellish just because you think, oh, I want this. You got to be realistic with the numbers, or else you could end up in a bad situation.
You want to grow and you want to get into the business, which is where we are too. We're early on in our careers in the real estate realm. You have a tendency to try to make a deal work on paper and find a way for the numbers to work. And that's what I mean.
You want to say yes.
And then you end up really close to the wire, and the one little thing goes wrong, and it can start tumbling.
Yeah. So you're not doing yourself any favors by forcing a yes. Sometimes you have to say no.
Exactly. What good is that next property if someone sneezes and all of a sudden you can't make a payment? So we try to have restraint and go the other direction. Okay, the numbers look good. Now let's try to kill the deal on paper. Let's increase vacancy. Let's anything that could happen. What if people move out? Are there military members? What if there's a war and they can break their leases legally with their deployment orders? What if how many of our tenants have the same job or the same employer? Things like that. And so we actively try to go through
the box on the scenarios.
That deal. And if it withstands, some hard work, then we know it's a good deal.
That is some heavy underwriting, but smart, because you never know the situations that are going to come up, like this one that we're in right now.
Exactly. And you can't predict everything, but if you don't necessarily need to know the reason, you can just kind of diversify everything, diversify the sources of your tenants. If you're in a smaller town and there's only one or two employers, you need to keep that in mind. What happens if one goes out of business? Are 40% of your tenants going to automatically, and the banks will do that as you get into larger loans. Freddie and Fannie, they're going to do lease audits. They're going to see if more than a certain percentage of your tenants have the same jobs or the same employers.
Interesting.
But you don't want to rely on that necessarily. You should be thinking about it on your own accord.
Absolutely. So you are looking to do more multifamily deals, and are you going the route of syndications now that you've done?
We are kind of a hybrid model that some folks out there do. We really want to build generational wealth. And one of the things that turns me off about the traditional syndication model, and obviously it can be customized to any given deal, but traditionally there's a lot of fees. involved acquisition fees and management fees, and that's to pay the syndicators, the general partnership team who
Oh,
found the
and
deal and brought it across the finish line.
yeah. And so
But
for
it's
those who don't know what a syndication is, because we do have a lot of new listeners to real estate, can you explain what is a syndication?
Yeah, it's kind of an ominous term, and it's used in a lot of different ways. So you have to kind of look at the context. But in general, a syndication is when you are raising money using other people's money to fund a deal. So you're still getting a bank loan of some sort, whether it's hard money or bridge, or maybe it's already, a stabilized asset. But the point is, you're still getting a loan, but the down payment, rehab, and any other soft costs and reserves are generally raised from private investors, people who have personal money or a self-directed IRA or something to that extent, and they want to invest in real estate passively. So as a general partner, I would go find a limited partner and I would say, okay, you have an X amount of dollars you'd like to invest. Now, all of the rates of return and all these things, it gets, again, wildly complicated. We keep it very, very simple. We want to create generational wealth. So getting rid of properties every 3 to 5 to 7 years based solely off appreciation is not really what we want to do. In my mind, that's just a longer term flipping project.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of syndications, not to get too far into it, the structure of the deal and how and where those investors get their money back and out of the deal is largely defined by the sale of the property. So it puts pressure on everybody to perform and then also sell. We wanted to hold on to those properties. Well, how do you do that? Well, you need to be able to get your investors' money back out, because once they have their money out, there's less pressure to sell the property. And so we kind of reverse engineered the process, which some others do, and it wasn't our idea. It's a proven concept, but you do have to buy with greater margins built in. So you do have to exit, the same fundamentals as you would on the single family flip side. You want to make sure that you're buying at a low rate, at a wholesale rate, and forcing appreciation in versus, or forcing equity and value versus counting on the market over time, which is it's completely out of your control. So if we know that the rents are low and we know the expenses are high, that's very predictable. We can predict exactly what increases in rent we can do, decreases in expenses, and force value into that property. Whereas if we're buying close to market value, there's no spread there. There's no margin. So all we can do is hope the market goes up, and in 5 years, it'll be worth more than it is now, which is safer in the multifamily realm, but still your hands are a little bit tied.
Yeah, you don't have that control over what's going to happen. So the way that you do syndications is you invite the people in, they make their money over 3 or 4 years, they exit. You still have that property and continue forward for your generational wealth. That way you're not just selling and losing it.
With our property down in Texas, our first one that we did with our own money, which came from, I think they call it the BRRRR method of single family investing, the buy, rehab, rent, or refinance and rent, the BRRRR method. We're applying the same thing to the multifamily realm. We buy at a low enough rate with the large enough margins between where we can buy it, how much we have to put into it, and what we can make it worth, the after repair value. And as long as there's a big enough spread there, we know that we can refinance out the same way as if it was our money in year number 2, except we're going to refinance out all of the investors. And they're going to get all their money back, but they retain ownership, a percentage of ownership in the deal. And so now they get basically an annuity, something that they own ownership in a property that they no longer have any money in. So it's really good for them.
Okay.
It's not tied up for 5 or 7 years. And it's good for us because there's no pressure to sell.
Yeah, that does work. It's like a win-win on both sides.
It really is. And a lot of the syndication models out there, the general partnership are getting paid their fees and their management and acquisition and all these other types of fees, whether the property produces any value or not.
That sounds a little dangerous.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's I'm no expert in it, but I can tell you that when it was explained to me, I was like, I don't understand. There seems to be a disincentive. Not everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And so when we came across some different investors that do this kind of more of a hybrid model, which is more an application of a single family flip or rental to the multifamily realm, we keep it simple. and no super complex deal structures. We keep it only as complex as it needs to be to get across the line. And so we're under contract right now on another 32 unit, and we're going through this. We're applying this model. So we're going to raise, a couple. It's a smaller deal, $200,000, but we're going to go through the process, and you get the attorney work, you build it in the cost, because it is guided by the Security and Exchanges Commission when you're accepting other people's money. But again, as long as it's predictable and you know how much it's going to cost for the attorney fees, you can just build that in. A lot of people shy away from it. They said, "Oh, it's too much, it's too expensive." If you know it on the front end, you can plan for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so,
And it allows you to go into larger deals that you otherwise would not be able to get into, and that's the key. If you're only buying based off your current income, most of us would not get very far.
Yeah, you got to start small. So if someone does want to get involved in a syndication, you're open to it. How would they get in contact with you, and what does that look like?
Absolutely. You can reach us on our website, which is www.aom-e.com. And I think it can probably be in the show notes. And I can also be reached. My email address is Branton, B-R-A-N-T as in Tom, O-N, at aom-e.com. I love talking to people. I love networking. People that are just getting started, I promise you, I've gone through the same frustrations. We're still growing ourselves. So at any given time, I work with people that are a step ahead and a step behind, and we love to cross the finish line together, whatever that finish line is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really great for people who are new to real estate investing that really want to do multifamily, but they have absolutely no experience. So they don't know what they're doing, but they might have some capital. Yeah. So this is a great way for them to learn by going through this process.
We brought in a guy on our team that is young. He has some good knowledge. He's proficient, but he didn't know what questions to ask. And he didn't have any capital, but he said, "But I have time. So what can I do to provide value to your team if I want to get involved?" And it struck a good chord with us. We hung out with him. We, built a relationship, and we said, "How about you come on board and help us source deals?" And I said, "We can't pay you. We're all growing together." I said, "But what we can do is, you'll be an equal equity partner in the deals that we work on together."
Nice. And so he's learning through this process and gaining knowledge.
Exactly. And so he gets kind of a front row seat of where our business is and how we underwrite deals and how we communicate with brokers and agents and other investors. And he'll get, for example, in this deal, he'll be a 20-30% owner in this deal. And that is strictly for the effort and time that he has put into with us to get that deal and make it a valuable asset.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. It's glad to hear that you're open, and really that's kind of giving back to the community in that way. You're not saying no just because someone doesn't have money, because he had something else valuable. He had time.
Exactly.
There's always something you can do to be a part of it.
Value comes in many forms. And sometimes you have to look at your team and say, okay, well, we're still holding down full-time jobs in addition to growing our real estate business. So to bring on someone that is going to get equity in a deal and that we don't have to pay a ton of money to that we otherwise don't have or would have to borrow, it's a win-win.
Absolutely. Well, I loved hearing about the multifamily and the way that you're doing syndications differently. I have not heard of syndications being done that way before. So I'm sure it's going to spike a lot of interest with a lot of people. So I definitely hope that they reach out to you. If you were to tell someone new getting into real estate, whether it be multifamily or otherwise, what's like your biggest bit of advice that you would give to someone?
I think it's two-part. I mean, it's kind of a cop-out answer to say stick with it, but it really is true. We acquired our 16 unit back in 2018, and in the summer of 2018, and we were learning how to scale and grow and do syndications, but at the same time, we were looking for deals, and it was over a year before we got another deal under contract, and that is just so frustrating when you want to be, whether
searching
doors or a certain amount of net worth or whatever it is, to try to exit your job or support your family or whatever it is specific to your situation. But you really do have to stick with it. You have to keep underwriting deals, keep talking to people. There's no one magic silver bullet that's going to create deal flow. You have to just keep emailing people, keep subscribing to people's brokers' email lists, be responsive, be respectful of their time. That goes a long way in this business, is being able to articulate what your buying criteria is to them, being very responsive when they send you something, underwriting it, and getting back to them. And and I think that goes a long way. Being genuine and operating with a certain level of integrity, I think, is a big thing in any business, but specifically this one.
Yeah.
And educate yourself. Don't close, educate yourself enough to make an informed opinion about what you want to do and invest in. Because if you try to do a little bit of everything, you're never going to get good at any one thing. And it doesn't mean you have to be a master of it, but you do have to kind of get your eye on the ball and say, okay, I can't do single family flips and rentals and wholesaling and multifamily and all these other things that you can get involved in.
It's too much. Pick one thing that fits you and your personality.
One day, there's an overflow of information. And so it's very easy to get that shiny object syndrome. So concentrate on something, talk to some people, find some people that are willing to mentor you or coach you through it. You don't need to go out there and spend $20,000 or $30,000 on a mentorship program. I mean, you can, and just make sure they're not just regurgitating the same information that they say on their podcast, which I think is too common.
Yeah. And we find in the real estate community, there's so many people that are just willing to share freely. They share their information. There's a lot of people that want to mentor new real estate investors. It's a community that's very open with communication, and no one's holding back knowledge. I've never heard of anybody just holding back knowledge here.
You have to pay the $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 or come to all their events to be able to get the secret sauce.
Yeah.
There is no secret sauce, because you're going to get there and they're going to sell you something else. And then there's going to be one more curtain that they say they're going to pull back, and then one more. And that's just, at some point you have all the information that you need and it's time to execute. It doesn't mean you know it all. You're going to make mistakes, but until you reach the execution plan phase of any plan, you're only going to learn so much. So I think that's key. And then, just like I said, stick with it, reach out, keep talking to people. And it's amazing how things just start to flow into you, as far as into your email box. Hey, we saw this deal, are you interested in this state, or are you interested in partnering in this fashion? And you start to have that dialogue. More people know what you're doing and what you're involved in. And that just
they'll gravitate to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that information. I think it's really eye-opening and gives people new ideas to think of, new realms that they may not have, thought of before, especially understanding how the commercial lending works with the multifamily. I think it makes it very attractive to look into it. So again, you can reach out to Branton on his website, looking for the partnerships or syndications for new deals. And thank you so much for joining us.
Learning more about what we do, how we do it, whether you have money to invest or you just want to ask some questions. I respond to a lot of emails, and we love talking to people. So regardless of where they are in the process.
Great. Thank you so much, Branton. We appreciate having you on the show today.
All right. Thanks. And thanks for everything you guys do over at Royal Legal Solutions.
Absolutely.